Hi, I'm Drew, and I'm an amateur model builder. I'm building a layout in my basement called the White River Line, inspired by the Frisco Railroad in the Ozarks. In this episode, I'm building a cement car. In this episode, I'm going to be working on a cement car for my railroad. Now this model is considerably more detailed than the boxcar I worked on previously, so I'm going to be splitting this into two parts. In the first part, I'll be doing the basic construction of this car, and I'll follow it up at a later time with weathering and paint. Now this is a Tichy train group model. It's actually a boxcar that's been converted to carry cement, and this will service the ready-mix concrete factory on my layout. As I unboxed the model in preparation for construction, I was a little overwhelmed by the number of parts in the kit. It also included wires for the grab irons, brake lines, the train line, stuff I've never worked with before. Although there aren't as many parts as the car kits I've done over the years, the 1/87th scale parts are a lot smaller than the 1/24th scale parts. This kit has detailed instructions that I looked over before I began. A little daunting at first blush, and I ran into some terminology for parts of the car's construction I hadn't encountered before. Bolsters, sills, crossbears, clevis. At least I'll learn something during construction. I began by gluing the supplied nuts into the floor. I used CA glue. Then I cemented the ends onto the car body. Before attaching the flooring, I had to do a little filing to get it to fit right. The fact that the car body is somewhat bowed made the fit tight, and it felt a little perilous. I was able to get the floor to fit snugly into the car body. The next step was to drill holes in the body for the grab irons. The kit includes a drilling jig to make sure the placement of the holes is accurate. The holes in the jig are spotted but don't go completely through the jig. Fortunately, this gave me the opportunity to try out the pin vise and bits I got for my mother-in-law for Christmas. Unfortunately, the pin vise and bits I put on my Christmas list were inferior and didn't do a great job. Not to mention the fact that the bits aren't labeled with sizes, and even the smallest bit is too big for the job. A trip to the hobby store was needed. The new bits and pin vise worked like a dream, especially after I lubed up the pin vise. It all made pretty quick work of drilling out these holes. Once this was completed, it was time to move on to the underframe. Although initially this construction is symmetrical, there is an A end and a B end. This detail will come into play a little bit down the line. Construction starts with cementing a body bolster on one end. Then the center sills are installed. Next, the body bolster on the other side is installed. In the next step, I add the door cross bears, which provide additional support over this highly trafficked area. Finally, the 14 cross-sill channels are installed. I ran into some issues with these fragile pieces breaking as I removed them from the spurs. I switched tactics to using my X-Acto knife. This helped a little bit. I had to make several repairs, including one that wasn't that great. You can see how this sill is bent. Well, accidents happen, even on the real railroad. A little extra rust on my weathering should make this car look even more realistic. And this will be out of sight most of the time anyway. Before moving on to the brake components, I had to install the hoppers for this cement car conversion. These came in two pieces, the hoppers as well as the slide gates. These days, cement is carried in covered hoppers on a railroad. Covered hoppers are useful for a variety of loose materials that need to be shielded from precipitation. In the era that my layout will replicate, although covered hoppers had been invented, they weren't at all in widespread use. This wouldn't occur until the 1960s. Instead of using hoppers, boxcars could be converted to hold these types of materials. And I have found documentation of loose grain being carried in boxcars that were adapted for that use. As part of the conversion for these boxcars, additional reinforcement is added along the bottom near the doors. With all these structural components and the hoppers installed on the bottom, it was time to move on to the brake rigging. Since this is a modification of a standard boxcar, the brake rigging has to be adapted to make room for these hoppers. The photos for the instructions on these modifications aren't crystal clear. They're kind of dark. I turned to the internet for a little support, and a poster on the Frisco train forum my visit sent me some pictures of his finished kit. This was really helpful. As I began prepping the parts for the brake rigging, I ran into another issue. The long brake lever flew off into the nether. Anyone who's built more than one model has spent time on their knees looking for parts. At some point, you just have to give up and make another plan. Fortunately, the sprues for the detail parts in this kit included parts for other kits as well. This way the manufacturer can use one die for a variety of kits and save some money. I found another part that would work with a little adaptation. Then I ran into yet another problem as I was removing the brake lever supports from the sprues. They were pretty fragile, and one broke. All of my best efforts to repair it were futile, and I decided it was best just to make one from some styrene strips I had left from my mill project. The pneumatic components for the brakes sit up on blocks. I decided to attach these components to the blocks before attaching them to the undercarriage. I figured this would help me with more accurate placement when cementing them into their final place. I allowed them to cure for a bit before moving on. I then placed the components in their correct location on the undercarriage. Next, I added the brake lever supports in place, including the one that I had remade. And then I installed the brake levers themselves. Although the cement car diagram doesn't show it, as far as I can tell, I did add the branch line pipe to the brake cylinder. Then I installed the train line. The train line, or brake pipe, is part of the train's emergency braking system. It's connected car to car. On a standard boxcar, the train line is routed through the middle of the car. But the hoppers interfere with this routing, and it has to be routed around the hoppers by the doors. I had to do some custom modifications to make this fit. I installed a pneumatic line between the split brake components. This was a little difficult and took me a couple of times. While I was waiting for the glue for the pneumatic brake line to cure, I added the brake rods. After installing the brake rods, I had to go back and fix the pneumatic line. I should have drilled holes in the brake components to aid in the installation, and I'll probably do that next time. With the undercarriage complete, next up was the roof details. First, I installed the roof walk. The corner platforms also have grab irons, and I needed to drill out holes for these before installing the platforms. Once the corner platforms were installed, I then had to move on to installing the roof walk supports. These were perhaps the smallest pieces in the whole model, and it took a lot of patience to install them. To finish out this section of the roof, I had to install the roof hatches for the cement car conversion. I also had to drill out holes for handles in these hatches as well. I'll install the handles later. Next, I installed tack boards into both ends of the car. Next were the brake details on the B side of the car. The brake components on the bottom of the car must be matched with the proper end of the car body for these components to fit right. I started by adding the brake platform supports. I then added the lower brake shaft support. Then I added the brake platform. I had to drill out the hole in the brake platform to get the brake shaft to fit. I then bent the brake shaft at the top to a right-ish angle and glued on the brake wheel. Then I installed it into the platform and support. I wasn't sure if I would have to drill out the holes for the grab irons on the ends of the car, so I didn't do so previously. But as I began to try and install these grab irons, I found that they did need to be drilled out so that the grab irons would fit. Once these were drilled out, I then installed all the grab irons on the sides and the ends of the car. When working on the ends, I snipped the ends of the wire to the correct length. I placed one end in the holes I'd previously drilled. I held that in place with my finger and then inserted the other end. When working on the sides of the car, I only had to snip one end. The holes on the left side were drilled all the way through. Once each of them were installed, I glued them into place with CA glue. All of the wire components require CA glue since styrene cement does not adhere to metal. Then I installed the grab irons to the corner platforms on the roof. Next were the doors. I glued door plates to the back of the doors to begin. I then installed the upper door guides and let them cure. I was not able to find any evidence that the Frisco Railroad used converted boxcars to haul cement, but the B&O Railroad did. They adapted 40 such boxcars for this use in 1933. The beauty of a freelance railroad like I am building is that I can do whatever I want. So I'm going to pretend that the White River Line did make use of these converted cars. Once the cement on the upper door guides had cured, I placed the doors into the upper guides and then slid the lower door tracks into place and cemented them. Then I cemented the doors in place. No need for the doors to move, as it would just let all the cement spill out. Just a couple more details and this kit will be complete. I installed the handles for the roof hatches. One of these handles went missing somewhere along the way, so I had to use one of my leftover grab irons and size it accordingly to fit. Finally, I installed the stirrup steps. I held off to the end to install these. They stick out like a sore thumb and can be easily broken or bent during the rest of the construction. In most cases, when I'm cementing parts, I place the part where it goes and then use the thin cement, allowing capillary action to flow the cement where it needs to go. These stirrup pieces won't sit in place by themselves. Holding the piece in place with tweezers while applying the cement requires more dexterity than I have. There are a few cases where I use a thicker cement, and this is one of them. The thicker cement is tackier than the thin cement, and it takes longer to cure. The tackiness allows me to place the piece in a precarious position, and the longer working time allows me to make any fine adjustments as it dries. With the stirrups in place, this build is complete. The cement car is ready for paint and weathering. I'll need to find some prototype pictures for the weathering, and I'll need to add the couplers. but I'll do this after the weathering is complete. Thanks for joining me on this episode. This model really pushed my modeling skills, and I learned a lot about modeling at this scale. I'm happy with how this turned out, and I'm going to build at least one more of these cars to go on my railroad. As always, I invite you to like this video and to subscribe to my channel. And if you click on the bell icon up above, you'll be notified when my next video comes out. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and all of those links are provided below. In my next episode, I'll be returning to the mill. I need to finish up some details there, as well as to build the foundation and the porch on it. And if I have time, I'll get to some weathering, or maybe even building a water wheel. So join me next time as I continue building the White River Line.